Hello friends! This video is about to change your life. With this simple walkthrough, you'll be making amazing pizzas at home in no time. So, what are we going to need? Well, some dough, your favourite frying pan to cook these bad boys. A fancy dough scraper is optional. It will help you get out of a sticky situation if you find yourself in one. Your sauce of choice, we're working with a tomato sauce for this one. Your cheese of choice, we've got a dry mozzarella. We can also vouch for this great vegan cheese. It's got an awesome smoky taste and melts really well. We love cheese, but don't use too much. As it cooks, it releases oil, which will make your pizza greasy and gross. And finally, your pre-prepared toppings. Make sure you've pre-cooked all the meat like chicken and beef, and all of the hard vegetables like potato and squash. Peppers and onions will need a light frying first, otherwise you'll have al dente veg on your pizza. As you'll see, the total cooking time is super short, so make sure you have all your sauces and toppings ready to rumble before you start.
Right, let's crack on. Pour a splash of olive oil onto some kitchen roll and wipe the surface of your pan with it. You don't want a heavy layer of oil, just enough to stop your dough sticking and crisp it up a bit. You want your hob on a medium heat because you don't want the oil to smoke. Then, move a shelf to the top of your oven, whack your grill onto full temperature and leave the oven door open a bit. Yes, grill. All will be explained.
The first step when moving back to your work surface is to dust it with flour. The wetter the dough, the more flour you'll need. Any flour will work here, it doesn't have to be fancy at all. This is just an unbranded plain flour. Before getting up close and personal with your dough, make sure you dust your hands. If you don't, you'll likely meet a sticky mess. Once you and your surface are dusted, pop your dough out of its container. Next up, we're going to shape the dough. Make sure you start off with a nice circular ball that's not too dry. If you need to knead your dough a bit before you get to this stage, then go ahead.
Top tip, if you're happier using a rolling pin, go for it. Just make sure you keep the dough nice and dry and keep it moving to stop it sticking to your pin and your surface.
We're going to shape the dough by hand, using the edges of our palms and our fingertips. Start by pushing down on the thick bit in the centre of the dough and pulling that outwards. This will mean you have good control and should be able to achieve an even thickness on the pizza, like so. If you feel the bottom starting to stick, then make sure the top of the pizza and your hands are floured nicely and flip it over. Don't worry if it rips or breaks. You can always roll it back up into a ball and start again. You can do this a few times, just make sure each time to squeeze it all tightly together. Also, remember this is probably your first time and it ain't easy, so be nice to yourself and your pizza and accept that it doesn't have to be perfectly round. It does, however, need to fit your pan, so don't get too ambitious. Once you've got to the size and shape you're after, it's time to get it on the heat. The easiest way to move your dough to your pan is to place your palm on the dough and peel the edge of it with your other hand. Then lift it up and flip it into your preheated pan. The pan will be hot, so please be careful not to touch it, but you will have a bit of time to arrange the dough if you need to.
And now we wait. This is a good time to get your sauce and cheese to hand and to chop up your toppings if you haven't done that yet. You want to give the dough time to go firm. After a few minutes, give it a gentle squidge and see where it's at whilst being careful not to burn your fingers. Once it's dry to the touch, you're ready to get your sauce involved. Pour it into the centre and then use a decent sized spoon or ladle to push it around, leaving whatever size crust you fancy. Try not to use a wooden spoon here, it will stick to the sauce and dough, make a big old mess. Next, sprinkle your cheese as evenly as possible all over. Finally, spread those toppings out to get even more exciting flavours on there. It's worth noting that if you have thinly sliced ham or chorizo, this is fine to go on without pre-cooking.
Now your pizza's ready for the big guns. Whack it under the grill on the top shelf, making sure that the handle is poking out of the heat, and watch the magic happen. Grills will vary in their temperature, so keep an eye on your masterpiece and enjoy watching it sizzle. In a matter of minutes, your pizza will be a delicious feast for the eyes and the tum-tum. Once the crust has started to brown, put the oven gloves on. Carefully remove your pan from the grill, remembering to turn it off. It's easy to forget in the excitement, and we don't want any fire hazards on our hands.
Top tip, don't just pour it onto a plate. The toppings will all flop off and you'll be heartbroken. Instead, use a spatula to ease the edge up and it will slide out like a dream. Top with a fancy garnish and serve with your favourite saucy boy. It will be the temperature of the sun for a little while, so do let it cool down before you tuck in. Enjoy!